Hey guys, it's Dylan, and in today's video I'm going to be going over my personal Diamond Perfect difficulty tier list. Now, first things first, I do want to say huge thank you to everyone who subscribed to the channel recently. 200 subscribers is incredible, and I couldn't have done it without you guys and all of your support. My videos have been getting more and more views, and the channel really seems to be picking up, and I'm just so happy to be doing this. Really am. Now, it is important to remember this is a completely opinion-based tier list, and we will most likely have some differing opinions. But as a professional player, I figured that my opinions might interest some of you guys, as I have more experience with these kind of charts, and especially with Diamond Perfect and everything. So I figured I would kind of give my insight out into why I've ranked certain songs where I have, and which ones are kind of borderline, and which ones could be moved around. Because I definitely think there are some that are not like solidly in place. So yeah, let's go ahead and start out with the 1 stars. We have The Drill, Machina Vibes, Machina Vibes, however you want to say it, and Gangnam Style. Now, the obvious 1 star here is Gangnam Style. It's never going to move. It is pretty solidly in the 1 star category, as it is below pretty much every extreme in the game, in my opinion. There's nothing easier than it. It is the easiest extreme to Diamond Perfect in the game. There's just nothing to it. There's a few 16ths in there, just a couple ones sprinkled in there, and like one long trill, and that's about it. The rest of it is just eighths, some doubles, and some swipes, and it's very simple to understand patterns. If you know Gangnam Style, you know the chart, you know it. It's very easy. Now, however, the other two, I don't think they're going to be controversial ones, but they're definitely higher end ones. Machina Vibes, it has a couple tricky parts at the beginning, and then after that, the chart just goes into full, basically free mode, where you've got just swipes. Now, one might argue that it's hard to Diamond Perfect because clearing it, which, yes, but clearing is a different category, and that's not what's going to be discussed in this tier list. If you can do swipes, you'll probably have no problem with Machina Vibes. And then we have the Drill. The Drill, it's definitely the hardest 1 star to DP. The most difficult part of the drill, in my opinion, is the little speed up part that's like in stage 4, I think. It can be kind of tricky to understand the rhythm there. It's really just kind of a freehand thing they did. I'm not really sure they even knew what they were doing with it, but it turned out okay. The rest of the chart really isn't that much more difficult. There's a couple 16ths in the main drop parts of the song. Other than that, it's really basic, pretty slow BPM, honestly. So yeah, you guys probably won't have any trouble with that one either. And now we move on to the 2 star category, where we see our second most filled row, surprisingly. Now this tier list shape is kind of abnormal, as we see kind of a lopsided tier list. Usually you would see more of a 3-4 star dominant area, with 2 and 5 kind of receding, and then 6 and 1 being the lowest. We do see 6 and 1 being the clear lower tiers here, but we see 3 and 2 actually being the most dominant rows here. Now the 2 stars, we start off with anomalies. Some people may argue that Anomalies is a 3, but I personally think that there's just not enough difficult parts in it. And you'll see I have the same argument for Heavy Shadows later on, but I'll talk about that when we get there. Now, Anomalies has a pretty lowish BPM for an extreme. The 16ths aren't incredibly quick. And there's really only one part. It's like stage 2 or 3, I think, or maybe both, that have 16ths in it. And then you just go on to basically just free for the rest of the chart. There are some other 16ths later in the chart, but they're not very difficult, and there's some swipes involved. And then a lot of the parts are just really long hold notes. And Heavy Shadows has the same thing. I think a very defining trait of Asphyxian songs is the choruses are just very easy, and then you get into these really deep, bassy parts, and then you have these easy choruses. So the choruses kind of throw you off and give you this imbalanced chart experience with both of them. Then Du Hast, a classic 2 star, really isn't ever going to move. It's pretty solidly, and it fits in with the 2 stars. It's just a lot of doubles. And, people do struggle with doubles. Some people might have a harder time with Du Hast. Personally, I never did. Doubles have always been kind of something I've been fine with. But if you can't keep fingers together, doubles might be a problem for you, and therefore it is a 2 star. It's not quite as easy as the 1 stars. There's a couple tricky parts, including the little 16th runs at the end, although they aren't that difficult. Next, we have kind of a controversial one. I would argue that Gimme Some More is borderline 3. And hear me out. There's a lot of 16ths in Gimme Some More. They might not be the fastest 16ths, and they might not be the most complex, and they might not be very hard to read, as they're all full-size notes because the scroll speed is relatively fast throughout the entire chart. But there's a lot of 16ths regardless. Now, A lot of people seem to have a really easy time with this one, and I've kind of taken that into account because I know a lot of people got very high scores their first try because it's not very hard to read. It's not a very hard chart to read. It flows very well. But I would say it is almost a borderline 3 just because of the amount of 16ths. Other than that, it's a really good chart. Nothing too difficult, like I said. There's a couple swipes thrown in there just for fun. And yeah, it's a perfect 2-star. Next, we have Heavy Shadows, as I mentioned earlier. The courses are just balls easy. It's not even funny. There's only one part in Heavy Shadows that I think is even remotely difficult, and it's in stage 4, I think. And it's where like those very fast 16th bursts, similar to like Therapy in a way, just very fast 16th bursts. And yeah, I can see how a lot of players would struggle with that, but that is the only difficult part of that chart. Everything else is just ridiculously easy. It's either free swipes or it's slow patterns, and personally, I just don't think that's enough to give it a 3. I know some people might argue it's a 3 because of that 16th part, but I just don't see it. Next up, we have Rockstar. Rockstar, I think a lot of people have started to come to the realization that Rockstar is actually pretty chill. The timing window is just very wide on it. It feels very wide. Again, there's just not very much going on. You know, there's a fair amount of 16ths, but they're not particularly difficult. The BPM's not very fast in that chart. And yeah, it's just not a very hard experience. The worst part is trying not to die to those stupid swipes when you got the double and then the swipe note. That's honestly the most difficult part. Everything else is very easy to read. It's an EDM song, so there's not going to be any drift or anything. Like Give Me Some More has some vocal drift. I didn't even mention that, but that is a thing. But yeah, that's Rockstar. Sandstorm, I debated with Sandstorm for a while because I almost put it in the 1-star. It is a personal opinions tier list, but when I look at these charts on base level, Sandstorm would not fit in with the ones, just sheer amount of notes and density and everything. It is pretty basic in of itself, just being a lot of the repeated 16th patterns. Nothing too difficult with it, but some people really do struggle with that repetition, and I get that. I used to myself, but it was actually my first extreme DP, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, so I think it more so fits in with the 2 stars rather than a 1-star or even a 3-star. I think it's definitely more suited at the 2-star level. Then we have Fastlane. Now, Fastlane, honestly, I was kind of divided on it for a while because at some points I kind of thought it would be a 3-star, but I think a lot of people, it's definitely a slower of the main rap extremes. We got like Raiden, and you've got Stand Up Tall, and then you've got Fastlane. Fastlane is your introductory rap extreme. And it does it well. It's not very quick. There's a lot of very easy readable patterns that aren't too difficult to get the hang of. And yeah, it's very easy to read and very fun to play and a well-written chart, and it's perfect for the 2-star. Then we have Therapy. Therapy seems rather divided, which surprised me a lot because personally I never really saw the difficulty with Therapy, but I think there's definitely a lot of people that would argue Therapy could be a 3. And I could see that. But at the same time, a lot of it is just very, very easy 8ths. Or I'm not sure what Therapy's BPM is. I won't claim if they're 8ths or 16ths. I'm pretty sure they're just 8ths. A lot of it. Now I will argue there is some pretty awkward down swipes, double down swipes that are much easier if you have a middle finger available, but if you're playing thumbs, Therapy will be very awkward to DP, unfortunately. And then the only real bruiser part of that is towards the end with that little 16th triplet burst and then the little 5 bursts of 16ths. Really, that's it. That's pretty much all the difficult parts of Therapy. So I think 2-star is more suited for rather than 3 stars. You'll see the 3 stars have a little more complexity to them. And then finally, we have one of the newest additions to the game, Is You Rollin', and I think, again, it's another kind of introductory hip-hop rap extreme, kind of similar to the Fastlane, very slower rhythms, not super fast-paced, and the choruses are very easy. So it's actually very good for beginners who might be looking for a slightly more complicated extreme that's not too difficult. It's pretty introductory and pretty good practice for some of the later extremes, such as Stand Up Tall or Raiden. But yeah, that is the 2 stars. Now we're going to move on to the 3 stars, our largest row, containing some controversial charts, I would say. But for the most part, I think most of the 3 stars here belong. First up, we have Bonfire. Bonfire, I almost put in the 2-star, but then I remembered there's actually quite a few little tricky parts there that might catch people off guard. There's actually Bonfire is a combination of all the things that people might suck at, putting it nicely. There's jacks. A lot of people struggle with jacks. There is opposite swipes that go back and forth. A lot of people might struggle with that. Very quick 16ths. Again, a lot of people might struggle with that. It's got it all. It's got it all. And while I don't think it's that difficult overall, in my opinion, I know a lot of people do struggle with Bonfire in general. But I think 3 stars more suited for it. I don't think it can go any higher, and I don't think it should go any lower. I think 3 stars is really where it belongs. Next up, we have Clash of Clans theme. Now, Clash of Clans theme, the main difficulty of it obviously comes from the double jacks, which are I don't know what you would call them, double, triple jacks. But there's quite a lot of them, and a lot of people just cannot handle that speed of double notes, which I get. You know, it's fast. I still don't really like that chart that much. I find it kind of awkward and janky to play. But other than those, the rest of the chart really isn't that bad. But those alone often boost it up to a 3. I could see it as a 2. I think I had it as a 2 originally, but I bumped it up to a 3 just because I know a lot of people struggle really badly with that one, and I think that 3 more fairly suits it and better represents it. Next up, we have Figure It Out. Figure It Out. That was a borderline one for me. I think it could have been a 2. Just because there's a lot of free to it. And if, hear me out. There's a lot of drift. And a lot of people suck at the stage 3, like kind of 16th, just like continuation. I know a lot of people struggle there, and I get it. It's kind of hard, but if you can hear the rhythm out, it's not too difficult. And if you can keep a tempo, you'll be set. The rest of the chart, not too terrible. Vocals, but the ending has a lot of swipes in it, which is a lot of free perfect pluses. And it doesn't drift too hard, which means if you can keep a rhythm, it ain't too bad. So I think 3 star is where I'm going to leave it for now, although I could see it being a 2 star for sure. Then we have Fogo. Fogo, some people might argue this one is a 4, just because of those drum rolls in stage 4, which I get. A lot of people struggle with the drum rolls. But I don't think that the drum rolls quite amount and create enough difficulty for it to be a 4 star when the rest of the chart is not that bad in my opinion. The drops themselves are not too awkward. I think there's just a very smooth rhythm there, and then obviously the verses in between are just not difficult in the slightest. There's just some vocals and just some eighths. It's really slow, honestly. But yeah, I think 3 star is pretty much where Fogo should stand for now. I Know a Little. This one I think is just gonna be a 3 star for the rest of its life. It's pretty much, it is a 3 star. It is the embodiment of a 3 star. There's just not a whole lot going on, but there's still some complexity in there, and obviously drift plays a big part with this one. Being an old like 70s song, it's drifty. So yeah, I think it stands where it stands, and that's pretty much it. N95, a lot of its difficulty comes from the earlier stages where everything is very compact on the standard. The speed is very slow, so the 16ths are just very compact, and it's kind of hard to read. I know a lot of people have a hard time reading that, which I get. I mean, even I had a hard time reading it when I first played it. It's just very weird to look at. And also the later stages too, with a lot of the like, I don't know what you call, like, his voice raising part, where, like, they do, like, a little upswipe double note thing for every time he does, like, the voice raising thing. That part's also quite difficult. It's very awkward and kind of startling, and it's kind of hard to keep yourself together at that part. And yeah, I think 3 star is pretty much where it's going to stand for now. I don't think I see it moving much because some of the other parts are particularly easy. So I think 3 star is pretty balanced for it. Then we have Party Hard. This one, I debated putting it in 2, but then I remembered, there's a lot of doubles in this one, a lot of swipes, and a couple actually tricky 16ths. That really quick staircase is actually kind of tricky, in my opinion, and then a big stack of doubles right after it. So I think 3 stars is where it's going to stand. I know a lot of people just either can't clear it or get bugged on it, just something like that. And I think 3 star, I think 2 star would work for it, but I think 3 stars is where I'm going to leave it for now. Although just know it's very borderline. It could be 2 star if it wants, It's kind of right there on the line. But then we have Stand Up Tall, which I think is not on the line at all. I think it's right dead center in the 3 star, as it's pretty much always been his entire life. Yeah, it's your average hip hop extreme. A lot of 16ths everywhere, except Stand Up Tall has a lot of kind of squished notes because the scroll speed isn't as fast as it could be until the final stage where everything kind of gets spread out. But it may be hard for some people to read because of the notes being squished. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that. That's just a chart speed thing. If they wanted to sharp the speed, they could. They did with the deluxe. They're not going to do it with this one. That's just okay. But yeah, it's just your average middle of the road hip hop extreme. Then we have Sweatbox, which I think is another really controversial one because some people will put it up in like the 5-star, some people put it down in the 1-star. I mean, personally for me, it's like a 1-star because like, you know, it's just straight 16s the whole time and it's not particularly difficult. But a lot of people struggle with those switched notes because they don't understand that hitting those is the same speed as hitting just 2 regular notes next to each other. Everything is the same tempo in that song. There's not a single tempo that's different in that song. It's all just 16ths, straight 16ths. It's a very satisfying and clean chart to play. And personally, I just think 3-star is where it has to be. I don't think there can be any. I don't think it can really move around anywhere. It's very straightforward as a chart. And then we have Tornado of Souls, which is less of a straightforward chart, but I do think it belongs in the 3-star. Although I could see it possibly even moving up to a 4. There is quite a bit of complexities in Tornado of Souls, as well as some drift. And then, of course, final stage, you know, you've got quite the guitar solo. And then, like, intro and stage 4, I believe, have those pretty awkward little, like, 16ths that you kind of have to, like, move your fingers around for. Some people might get tripped up on that. I know I did when I first played it. But, yeah, I think 3-star is kind of where it has to be for now. Like I said, I could see it being a 4-star, but I think 3-star better suits it. And then we get to the 4-stars. Our rows are starting to decline in the number of songs that are in them. And as we climb up, we're getting to some of the more rough around the edges charts or just more brutally difficult charts. And first up we have Firestarter, which is one of those just, ugh, what a nasty chart. The reason Firestarter is here should not be a surprise to anyone, but it's just a bad chart. It's just a bad chart. And, you know, I'm surprised they haven't come back and redone it at some point, but it's just not good. The vocals don't line up in some spots. Some sounds don't make any sense the way they charted them. Mostly it's just a vocal problem. But, yeah, it's just a disaster chart. And it used to be much worse when the perfect plus window was tighter, but now as it's wider now, it's not as big of a deal. It's not as quite as difficult as it used to be, but it's still a beast. It's still a beast, and I'm still impressed if you DP it. Give Me Chocolate, an OG, one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult extreme game to DP of its time. Who remembers when it was the most difficult? Because I remember a time before the Trooper existed. And hey, look at where the Trooper's at now, sitting in the 5-star. We'll get to that later. But Give Me Chocolate. Once you understand that it's just straight, would it be 8ths? Yeah, it's just straight 8ths for the entire chart. It really kind of simplifies a lot of things. If you can keep a tempo of just straight 8ths throughout the whole chart, just keep that in your mind, the rhythm of just 8ths. It's not that difficult. There are some trippy swipes you have to look out for, but overall, it's just not a difficult extreme, or at least not as difficult as it used to be. But once you kind of get the rhythms down, it's not as difficult as you may think, which I think a lot of people should go back to Give Me Chocolate and kind of redo it, give it a try, and kind of re-mentally think it, because I think a lot of people overthink the chart, and if you come back to it, you might see yourself improving on it. Next up, we have Overdrive. Overdrive is a chart you either love or hate. And I could see both sides of it, but personally, I'm just pretty neutral on it. It's a chart of all time, and I don't mind it. But I know some people who just like absolutely love the chart, and I get it. It is a very perfectly synced EDM, satisfying chart to play. And some people hate it. Some people hate it, and I get it. The left-hand jacks are kind of annoying. The double note inserts are kind of annoying. And the swipes are kind of annoying. Everything's kind of annoying there. But if you know how to play it, it flows very well. And that's why I've put it in the 4-star, because it can be difficult. But if you know how to do it, then it's not that difficult. And you might see that as the theme throughout the 4-stars with stuff like Give Me Chocolate. You know, if you know how to do it, it's not as bad as you think, but it can be difficult. Then we move on to Raiden. Raiden is the big brother to Stand Up Tall, in my opinion. It's got the same complex 16th rhythms, but in a much more difficult way, I would say. There is a little more vocal drift happening here, especially in Chameleonaire's part. There's a lot of like it starts to go late in some parts, and you kind of gotta like catch yourself on that. But there's just a lot more going on with that chart, and I think it's a little more awkward to do. It doesn't flow as well as Stand Up Tall, and you kind of have to be prepared for that. So yeah, I think 4-star it kind of has to be. You know, you've got the lower tier, you know, Izzy Rollin and Fast Lane. Then you've got the kind of middle tier hip hop with Stand Up Tall, and you've got the 4-star tier with Raiden. I think that's kind of where it belongs. But then we have Sexy and I Know It. Now, personally, me, I almost put it in the 5-star. I'll be honest, because it's just such a weird, awkward, wonky, and sometimes incorrect chart. But at the same time, it is not as difficult as some of the 5s, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't put it in the 5-star. So let's talk about it, though, because there is quite a few difficult parts in the chart. Vocals are all over the place, kind of wild. You kind of have to predict and know how the song goes to be able to play them correctly, especially in that intro stage. A lot of the note sizing is very weird and hard to read, but if you look at the lines instead of the tile size, it'll help a lot more, I think. But then we get to like the double stack where you've kind of got this constant tapping in one lane with your other finger playing notes according to the vocals. That can be quite difficult to read if you don't know what is coming up. And then you've got stage 4, which is notoriously bad for having some really off vocals and just like some really weird parts that don't make a whole lot of sense. But regardless, you know, you get through that, and then you've got the wiggles. The wiggles, yeah, if you stuck with staircases, well, I'm sorry, Sexy and I Know is here to just drag you even farther down. And yeah, the chart's just brutal. There's a lot of things that can come at you, but I think 4-star is where it's ultimately going to belong because there's charts that are harder than it to DP. But then we have The Devil Went Down to Georgia, Corn. This one was kind of tough. I think that there's enough here to make it a 4-star. Not enough to make it a 5, obviously. I think 4 is where it kind of belongs. And because, you know, there are 16ths, there's swipes, there's vocals that are weird, but there's nothing too weird and there's nothing too difficult about it to where it's like, ugh, that might be a 5, that might be a 3, you know. It's not quite those levels, you know. It really does fit perfectly right where the 4 is. And the 6-star format definitely helps with that. I do want to say, I think the 6-star format should be the finalized format of these tier lists because it kind of allows us to exclude the top dogs, the bottom dogs, and spread the middle, which was the 3-star, into 2 categories, being the 3 and 4. And I think that's very important to be able to do because having low and high 3s was very hard, and you have to put things in 2 and 5 that you may not have wanted to before. And then our last 4-star here, Plasma, which is like another really recent one. Last season, obviously. But Plasma, I almost put Plasma in 5 because Plasma's got a lot going on with it. If you're not prepared, it's an EDM extreme. You know, it's on beat, it's perfect, but it's got some really complex rhythms and some awkward swipes and some really weird like it's got some really weird like staircase swipe action and some jacks. There's some really awkward jacks that even I struggled with at the time, which is just like, you know, it's shocking. Considering where I'm at now, I'm like, okay, this chart is actually kind of awkward, you know? There's kind of a lot of struggle points here. I'm like, okay. But I think 4-star is really where it belongs. I don't think I could see it being a 5 quite. It's not as notorious as these 5s that you'll see here in a second. I think the 5s really are in a league of their own, and I don't think Plasma can really touch that for now. But maybe if I think about it, you know, maybe in the future I may decide to tweak with it a little bit. But I think 4 is where I'm going to leave it for now. But now we finally move up into the top dogs. A lot of these actually are previous or ex 6-stars, but we have some 5-stars here. And trust me, it was very hard for me to choose the 5 and 6-stars, and I'm still not 100% confident on it. So if you have suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Please leave any suggestions here because I'm kind of stuck with some of these. And obviously we started with a very tough one, Duality. But I think Duality, it was a 6-star at the time, but I think it's kind of moved down in my mind as we progress through the seasons because if you look at it on base level, it's just not all that it's hyped up to be, at least not as much as the deluxe of it is. So I think the deluxe Duality is a 6-star still, but I don't think the standard is. And I think really that just comes down to the simplicity of it. You know, you've got doubles, and you got sixteenths, and then you got doubles, and you got sixteenths, and you got doubles. You know, it's really just, it's a very straightforward experience. Sure, there's some drift and some awkwardness in there, but if you can look past that, it really isn't more than that. And that's why I think 5-star is more where it belongs than a 6-star. And I keep in mind, a lot of these 5-stars are like 5, borderline 6, not 5, borderline 4, in my opinion. You'll notice that as a trend as we keep going. Godzilla never was a top dog in my mind, I don't think, but it never was really below a 5-star in my mind. And that's because, you know, stage 1 through 4 is obviously pretty free in terms of difficulty. It's more like a 3-star in those stages. But final stage, obviously, very brutal for a lot of people. Obviously, I didn't personally struggle with it as much as some did. I was kind of like Ben Mattson, where we have these kind of strong points, strong suits when it comes to just like 16th drills. You know, it's not very difficult for me personally to do that, but I know a lot of people don't have the stamina, and, you know, it is good practice to build up that stamina, but if you don't have the stamina, it can become very aggravating, and if you die in that part constantly, it can become very aggravating. Trust me, I know. But I think 5-star is where it's ultimately got to reside, because stages 1 through 4 just do not lift it up into that 6-star territory. And then we have the Trooper. The Trooper might shock a lot of you guys that I've kind of bumped it down to the 6-star, and I've kind of paired the Trooper with the Motherlode here because they're very flippy floppy in my mind. If there's anything that's going to move from 5 to 6 and 6 to 5, it's going to be Motherlode and Trooper. And that's because as I've kind of looked between them, and I kind of bundled them in, so I won't talk about the Motherlode now. I'm going to talk about it now instead of later. But as I've looked more at the Motherlode compared to the Trooper, I'm seeing more complex and awkward patterns in the Motherlode throughout, and especially in that guitar solo, than I see in the Trooper. The Trooper has actually become very straightforward in a way. I know it's still quite difficult and it's still quite brutal, but I think that the Motherlode presents itself more awkwardness and just more overall complexity and difficulty, and raw, just like, it may not be as raw and difficulty, but it has a lot more complexity and a lot more awkwardness and a lot more technicality to it that requires a little more advanced ability to DP. Whereas the Trooper has kind of become stale at this point. You know, at one point it was the beast of the game, but obviously we have stuff like Hallowed Be Thy Name, which is the beast of the game, if you didn't know. Of course, Iron Maiden had the beast and it reclaimed it with Hallowed Be Thy Name, typical Iron Maiden. But yeah, the Trooper just isn't there anymore for me, honestly. I think it deserves the 5-star now. It could share 6-star with Motherlode, possibly, but I think I'm going to leave it at 5 for now. It's just very borderline. Just know that. I think it's more borderline so than Duality, honestly. But next up we have We Live Forever. Now this one has always been kind of a almost 6-star, almost 6-star, kind of 5-star. Not a 4-star really, but it's just kind of, it has to be a 5-star. It's not complex or awkward or drifty enough to be in a 6-star. It's a very straightforward extreme. Its difficulty really comes from those swipes in final stage. The swipes in final stage are very awkward to time with the 16th notes, the standard just notes next to them, which causes a lot of people to miss time and still get perfects there, which is very annoying and very difficult, and I get it. I used to be a huge struggler of We Live Forever. I would have to pause after like every pattern just to recollect myself and not die to a swipe or not mess up notes around the swipes. I just couldn't process it back then. But now I've kind of changed the way I think of the part, and now I don't struggle with it as much anymore. I'm pretty solid with We Live Forever, but I do think that it's a 5. I don't think it's a 6. I don't think it quite has enough to become a 6. And that leaves us with Wynona's Big Brown Beaver, which is an iconic extreme. Up there with Gimme Chocolate, although I think Beaver has just a lot more going on with it than Gimme Chocolate. With Gimme Chocolate, it's very straightforward, a lot of eighths, you know, very easy to understand. With Beaver, you got these drifty 16ths, these vocals that don't quite line up sometimes, and it's just a very awkward experience. A lot of people struggle to read final stage with the little like bass solo that happens. And I get it, because Space Ape chose to cut the solo into pieces, like pieces of 5-note bursts, which kind of makes it awkward to read. And I do, that does make me excited for the deluxe of it, because I feel like it'll be a more complete pattern, which will be more fun to play. But for now, we have these kind of cut up pieces that I think is very difficult for people to read. And hopefully, when I get to that one, it'll be like one of the last. When I get to that one in my extreme marathon, hopefully my video and taps can help you guys kind of understand where it's cut into pieces at. Because if you look carefully, you'll notice like, oh, that's not just one continuous pattern. You've got a whole lot of stuff going on here. And then obviously the elephant in the room, that long hold with the notes next to it. Thumbs players despise it, and I get it. That's awful to have to play with one finger. Personally, me, I always use my middle finger on that hold so I can use my 2 indexes on the notes in the middle and left lane. Because I get it. It's just awkward to have to do that part with one finger. And yeah, personally, I hope they do something better with that with the deluxe. But I think all that kind of levels out into a 5-star because it didn't have quite that X factor that puts in the 6-star. But it is a nice 5-star edition, I think. But now that I'm thinking about it, I think Motherlode almost would go in the 5-star better and just leave the 2 elites for 6-star. But we're gonna keep Motherlode in 6 for now. But there is the two outliers here that I think need to be talked about. We're gonna start with No One Knows, as it's the older one, and then we'll move on to Johnny Winter. So, No One Knows. It is the classic OG destroyer of all extremes, just the most awful thing ever. It has drift beyond belief. If you don't believe me, go play right now. You'll probably notice stage 4 is pretty weird. Why is it weird? Because everything just kind of doesn't line up. You've got the first set of gallops that kind of go to the beat, and then you got the second ones that are like super late, and you got the third ones that are kind of early, and you got the fourth ones that are super early. It doesn't make any sense. And then you've got kind of this very repetitive beginning to final stage that kind of slowly drifts late, and then it comes back, and it's like, ooh, all over the place because it's an old song. It's an old rock song, and they did not have an electronic device to keep themselves on tempo there, unfortunately. But and then, obviously, the obvious thing about it, the little solo there with the very compact notes that are kind of lined up in a way where it's kind of hard to read, but if you didn't know, they are 12ths. They're just very compact 12ths stacked on each other. They could have been charted better, undoubtedly, but the way they charted it, it works, but it is incredibly difficult, undoubtedly. It's hard to do that without finger crossing, and thumbs players really can't do that. It's kind of awkward. I mean, you obviously can, but it's not very comfortable. Definitely not as comfortable as indexes, and it's kind of like a cock block in a bit of a way there. But yeah, No One Knows is just kind of like that. And even after the little solo there, you've got some really weird timings with some really quick staircases, and then that last 12th staircase part that can even throw in some random perfects there. Another thing to kind of talk about is because the scroll speed isn't super fast, the perfect bar is kind of small, which makes the timings pretty difficult in my opinion. But yeah, No One Knows is just like that OG beast. It's always been up there as one of the hardest to DP in my opinion, and it's one of my, if not my least consistent DP out of all of these. But actually, my least consistent DP is the only song I haven't talked about yet, which is Johnny Winter. Johnny Winter. Be careful of the fool. That fateful morning I woke up, opened up my BeatStar, and there it was, the Island Breeze Tour Pass. And I pressed purchase. I pressed purchase on it. I did it. I don't know why. It was such a bad tour pass. I don't know why I bought it. He was like one of my first boxes. In all seriousness, Space Ape, why did you choose this? Why did you choose this song? All the songs you could have chose. He's a good artist too. Like Johnny Winter, props to you. You're just an awesome jazz artist, okay? The bluesy, jazzy smoothness of your guitar is awesome, but oh my god, it does not translate into BeatStar at all. The chart feels like it's genuinely AI made because of the precision of the notes. I mean, props to the charter. I'm pretty sure they literally had their like chart in like free place mode because there's no way they were following any sort of BPM there because it's a song from like 69. It would drift. it would drift like a motherfucker. But yet there's hardly any drift in the chart, which is kind of shocking, which makes me think that they definitely had like some AI program shit placed in them notes, because for it to not drift at all is just kind of very weird. It doesn't not drift at all, but it's very minimal for a song from like 69, I'm pretty sure. But just very suspicious. But yeah, the chart is a disaster from start to finish. Now, granted, the standard has a lot more kind of chill parts in it, but the standard's timing window is so much tighter, to the point where that stage 4 brutal kind of spam part, where you just kind of have to aimlessly kind of flick your fingers around and hope you just did it, is just, it's awful. It's the worst thing we've ever seen in BeatStar. We've had Thrift Shop, we thought that was bad. We've had Miss Jackson, we thought that was bad. Well, here's Be Careful with the Fool. Ladies and gentlemen, the hardest extreme in the game to DP, in my opinion, and the worst extreme chart in the game, in my opinion. And there you have it, guys. That is my personal extreme DP difficulty tier list. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. Again, I want to emphasize how thankful I am and how grateful I am for 200 subscribers. This is kind of going to act as the 200 subscriber special video, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I feel like I needed to come back with some more creative content after I've been kind of on a DP video upload spree, so hopefully this comes out soonish. Again, these videos some of these longer videos take forever to process on YouTube. It's kind of ridiculous, but I'm not gonna rant about that. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video, whatever that is. I'm not sure. Probably some DP videos, but I do have some other fun content videos planned for the future, so I will see you in those. Adios.